We are up to today Daf Hey Amid Aleph, and basically the Gemara is focusing on what the Rav originally said is that that if a mincha, if you brought a mincha sa'omer shaloi l'shmoi, then it's possible. Why is it possible? Even though the Mishnah doesn't mention it, because the korban tzibur is because it has a purpose. The purpose is to be an enabler. But if it's not enabling anything, because you did loy l'shmoi, the whole purpose of the mincha that you bring of the flour, that offering of the barley offering is to be matter the new crop. But since it's not going to do that, so therefore he says it is possible. We're going to have two other opinions. First, we're going to have Reish Lakish. Of hey, Amid Aleph, Reish Lakish. So first, we rejected what Rav said from a brisa. Comes along 5 lines on top of the page. Reish Lakish says mincha sa'omer. It comes to the mincha the omer shekmatza shalei l'shma. If you did the kimitza not l'shma sheda, it is kosher. It is kosher. Actually, I have a gemara here already. So if he did a kimitza. So the Shlokish is arguing on Rav. Rav said yes, if you did a mitzvah shalei l'shma, the din is that it's possible because it's not achieving its end. The Shlokish said no, the omer is kosher. Aber the shureh ain't a chol, but you can't eat it. The whole purpose of this omer is to be mater chodesh, but since it did not, I'll agree. Since it's loy l'shma, it's not going to be mater chodesh. So as far as a korban is concerned, it's still a kosher korban, but you're not yotzeh. Therefore, you cannot eat from this particular omer until you bring the next omer. You need an omer to be mater. So you argue the Rav, and you say it's possible the korban, I say it's kosher, but I agree with you, you cannot eat it because it didn't enable what it was supposed to enable. Okay, so the first obvious question is we had more psachim, and we learned more psachim from a pasuk where it says Memashke Yisrael. It says that when you bring a korban that has to be Memashke Yisrael, which means something that is capable to be is kosher, that a person, a Yisrael, can drink it. You bring that from Mincha and Eilu, Shlamim, and so on to Bechaper. This is not Mashke Yisrael. Since you cannot eat it, how can it be a valid korban? Menachos Yisrael. Rav comes along and makes a chiddush. Somebody says, Reish Lakish is of the opinion that ein mechusas man l'bay b'yom. We had a whole discussion if at night is considered mechusas man. Here, right now, you cannot eat it, but because in a couple of hours you'll be able to when you bring this other korban. So this is now only a mechusas man. And a mechusas man, he says here, is not a chsaron. So even though right now you cannot eat from this minchas ha'omer because you still got to bring another one, it's not a chsaron, therefore it's a valid korban. Okay, so we're going to just talk about this point, if there's a mechusas man or not. So you're telling me that ain't mechusas man, it says in the Braisa that there's a difference, there's chumras and oifis that you don't have in menachos, by a korban made out of birds that you don't have by flour offering, and the chumras and menachos you don't have by oifis. And now it lists them. Yes, but oifis menachos a chumra that you have by birds that you don't have by menachos by flour offering. Yes, menachos and oifis. Yes, but oifis. Number one is sha oifis buyin or different dinim. Oifis buyin but you can have partnership. When it comes to oifis, you can have partnership. However, menachos by korban it says v'nefesh. It says in the Chumash, if a nefesh wants to bring a mincha since it's singular form, you cannot have partnership. That's one difference. Next thing is kapara. Those people that even after they went to the mikveh and they already had the sunset, they still cannot eat from kachim until they bring the korban the following day. And he lists them here: Zav, Zava, Yerled, Cemetery. These four. So what do you call it? So mechusre kapara. It's another case. What? They all bring what kind of korban? Birds. None of them bring a flour offering to enable them to eat from kachim. That's another difference between oifus and mincha. And the third thing is v'hutru miklal isuran b'kodesh. That what happens is, what are you doing with a bird? A bird is you're doing malika. For a hedye, for an ordinary person, you did malika on a bird, it's treif. It's an avela. You cannot eat it. But for kodesh, it's mutter. So we are matter from their iser when it comes to kodesh. And there's no example like that in mincha by flour offering that a hedged is also, but for a gvoy it's mutter. And that's the point that we're going to focus on. What do you mean? You just said right now, you can bring a mincha that you did loy l'shma, right? You did loy l'shma, which nobody can eat from it because it didn't do its job, and yet it's a kosher korban. So that's, in other words, you tell me that by mincha you don't have this concept that that it's also, and yet it's still good for the gvoya. Here, by mincha, you just said Ishlakish just said that you did a mincha shaloi lishmoi. It's a valid carbon, and yet nobody can eat it. So why are you saying there's a difference between oif and mincha? That's the question that Rav Avda is going to ask in Ishlakish. The yesh menachas, then but we'll finish Brisa first. The yesh menachas, what do we find by menachas? Menachas to unas kli, that by a bird, as Taisel explains, by a bird, after you do the malika, you go straight and you do the mitzvah, you go ahead and squeeze it, or you sprinkle it on mizbech. But by a mincha, there's another step in the way. You have to take the kmitza, put it into a clay shutters, into a keli, and then you bring it to the mizbech and you burn it. Tamenachas to the kli and tenufa menachas you have to wave it. You don't have that by bird. V'hagosha by menachas by mincha you have to bring it to the southwest of Marav Israel is that corner there, right opposite the base of English. And v'yeshna b'tzibur k'v'yochid by mincha you have a mincha tzibur like a mincha zaymer. You don't have that by and by birds. There's no bird ever that's a carbon tzibur. Hashem Yibayfus. Now, if you just look, is all right. But Menachas, Nami Mishkachas law, Menachas, we find also the Hutru Miklali, Sudan Bekaidish. You cannot eat from this mincha because there was no from this mincha because it did it wrong, so there's nothing to be mattered, and yet it's a valid carbon. Umani mincha says the Gemara, no. Even the ain mechusas malabobi, and we just established the principle that if within the same day it'll become mutter. It's not. It's as if it already happened. As if already happened. So therefore, what are you going to say? By mincha, you cannot eat it. You could eat it, in theory. It's as if it already happened. So though it's not, it's like by bird. By bird, malika is an avela. Nobody can eat from it. Okay. Mosiv Rav Sheish asks a question now on this principle of the shlukish. So you say that even though it didn't happen yet, if it's only baby yom, mechusas man, baby yom is not considered mechusas man. Let me ask you a question. When it comes to Mitzvah, there's a whole process how you do it. You sprinkle it 7 times, and then you have to put the blood on the hands, and you have to put the oil in that order. What happens? Moshe says, "Hegdim matan shemen lematan dam." You're reversed order. First, you put the oil on the thumbs and the toe of everything else of the Mitzvah, and the earlobe, and then you did the blood afterwards. The seder should be fakert. First the blood and oil, but you did the reverse. Hegdim matan shemen lematan dam. What should you do? So after you did the matan dam, do the shemen all over again. And we'll ignore the first shemen that you did as if it never happened. And now you did it right. You did it correctly. You did first the dam, and then you did the oil afterwards. And then you do the oil again. In other words, the first oil didn't work. The question is going to be, if mechusas man, if it's just a question of time, maybe it's not a problem, so treat it as if it happened. What's wrong? Now that you did it already, okay, we said you should do first blood and then oil. But now that you did it, what's the problem? You shouldn't have done it yet because the time is after the blood. But you did it. So say mechusas man by the yom is not sudden. Anyway, then it says another process. What happens if you did the bahinus lamatan shevi? You're supposed to first spray the 7 times, and then you're supposed to do the bahinus, the toes and all that. What happened? You did all the way around. Easy malenu shemen, but you matan bahinus acham matan zayin. Do it again. If you tell me if you can tell me that there's no mechusas man for the same day, why do you have to repeat the process again? No, you do it the same day. You do it again. No, you did already the oil. What? No, you did the oil and then you did the blood. You should have done the way around. So what do we say? Right after you did the blood, do the oil again. Why? When you did the oil, it was mechusas man. It was yes before the right time. But you're saying if it's still all happening the same day, it's not really a chsaron. So there's no chsaron there. I mean, obviously, you should have done the other way around. But my David, what you did, you did. What's the problem? Amar Papa said, "Shiny hilchos mitzayda." There's a different thing. Even though taka mechusas man is not considered a chsaron, but we have a gzeirus hakosah when it comes to mitzayda that you have to follow the steps, the process, the way it says. Shiny hilchos mitzayda ksiva behu havaya. It says over there, it says zois tiya toidas mitzayda. Tiya means you gotta follow this protocol. It has to be done exactly this way, and any other way doesn't work. So it's different. You have to follow the steps the way I told you. So the Gemara, okay, so let's continue with Mitzvah. Moshe, Rapapa himself now. Rapapa is one who defended the Shlokish. Now he asked the question. Ask Rapapa, continue with Mitzvah. Apart from the sprinkling and everything else, you also bring a series of kabbanas. And the series of kabbanas is first he brings an asham and then he brings a chatas. What happens if he reverses the order? He brought the chatas first and then he brought the asham. So you would think, okay, he did it the wrong way, but he did it. And especially we just said Mechusas man is not a chsaron. So what we should do is, but we don't want to continue. So you did the shchita, right? And then you have to do Kabbalah. You have to also do the zrik and all that. You know what we'll do? We'll wait. We'll wait. Now go ahead and do the asham, shech the asham and spray the blood, and then you go back to the chatas. But what do you do about the blood will congeal? So you'll have a kohen standing there by Pesach. We'll learn a kohen stands there and continues to stir the blood to make sure it doesn't solidify, doesn't congeal. So the Brai says, "Lo yehei acham and no, I don't want you to do that. That chatas that you did was wrong, and therefore you have to leave it overnight and let it lose its surah, and then become decay. Then you burn it. It's possible. It's disqualified. Now the question is going to be, if Mechusas man is not a chsaron, true, the chatas should have been on after we did it before. So leave it and you continue. So Yimor asked Papa, I don't understand what your question is. You just told us a minute ago. You're the one who said that mitzvah is unique because it says tia, it says tia. You have to follow steps. So what do you want? But you want to make a myself Papa, but a Papa who he just answers shiny mitzvah. Who have you? So it's difficult. It says they're kitia. Listen to Papa's question. That pasuk of Zois Tia talking about the activities that are unique to Mitzvah. All these avodas that you need, for example, the spraying of the blood and putting on the toe and the earlobe and all that. But Shchita is not an avodah. Why is Shchita not avodah? It's very interesting. So,
it's only a hefsek, isn't it?
Why is Shchita not avodah? So Rashi said because Shchita ksheira bizarre. So it comes up from Rashi that shchita, the fact that the Torah says that shchita ksheira bizarre tells us it's not an avodah. Torah says that's an outcome. Because it's not an avodah, therefore Zar can do it. Not because Zar can do it, therefore it's not an avodah. So why taka shchita not an avodah? So the famous Tosfos here brings in the Yitzchak line, somewhere else he brings the name of the Rivam. A geschmack of word. Tosfos says, you know why shchita not an avodah? Because every animal you want to eat, you have to shecht. So it's nothing to do with korbanos. If you want chulin to eat, you have to shecht also. So if the Torah says you have to shecht your carbon, it's not a din in carbon, it's a din in behemoths. Achila, in behemoths. And doesn't no difference if it's an oila, which is achilas mizbech, or it's an animal, which is achilas chatas, and achilas koinim. But and once we've established that it's not an avodah because it's universal, so then you'll say Azor can do it as well. But all the other things, the Kabbalah and the Halacha, those are all mitzvah the carbon. That's different. Yes, I want to say.
I was going to ask, I'll leave it with Rashi. How's he going to answer the what do you call it, the Hablakas Hanedas, which is Ksher B'Zoy?
Only Hablakas.
It says, Shalachot Gedolim Mishalahim, the Bernish Shalom Taldar.
The Rambam said that's the Hakabah. Cleaning of the nair. The cleaning of the nair is for the Rambam has to be only a kohen. Why? It's interesting. I mean, never talked about it all. Why the hatov is like more important than the hadlaka. Anyway, let's continue. Now, so the Gemara says, so Papa says, I have a question now. So shchita is an avodah. So the pasuk,
we say 4 avodas, right? And we say shchita.
Yeah, legal and all that. But it's not an avodah. It's just that it relates to regular carbon, so your machshava can parcel it and so on. But it's ksheira bizarre.
And for avodah zarah, is there something shchita?
Yeah, you shech avodah shech laha, whatever you shech.
But that's what I'm saying. In that term, we're using it as an avodah.
That's true. Yeah. I guess in certain ways it's from the now, see, my question is, if you tell me it's not a chsaron, then you hey Papa said, change my mind. It is a chsaron. It is a chsaron Mechusas man. In other words, the way we have to understand it is when you say you have to have an order, there's a chakir nachreim, not but general rule. When you have an order, A followed by B, is it a din in A or is it a din in B? Does A have to be before B, or the pshat is that B has to be follow A? And it comes over here. If you learn that B has to follow A, then this is Kain Zman. This man hasn't arrived yet. Since A wasn't done yet, then B's chiyuv hasn't started yet. But if the word is that B can be the first thing, it makes no difference. Navas A is has a din in A that A has to precede B. So then there's no mechusas man here whatsoever, which is the way the Abba will learn and so on in the verse of Papa. Anyway, talk another time. Elamana Papa. Eine time with the Shlokish. This is the word of the Shlokish. The Kasavadi hold this. Mchutzas man boy biyim is considered sudden. This came Avoda. When it comes to setting aside animals, no, but when it comes to actually working with animal, yes. No, so why isn't it sudden here? So what about the oimer? Going back to oimer. So how come we asked the question? How can you say that the oimer itself you're not allowed to eat, and yet there's a valid carbon? The Shlokish said that. How can that be? If you can't eat it, Mashka Yisrael, Menamutil Yisrael, has to be something that's permitted. So we answered, Mechusas man is not a sudden. Now we're saying no. Min hadin. As soon as the second day Pesach comes along, you're allowed to eat the oimer already. Min hadin. Like Rabbi Yechim Bazaka said, no, today Yem Hanaf Kuli Asa, but Midrabanan. Because Zayda, that Yibana Beis Hamikdash and all that, we had in the Mishnah in Sukkah. But he says like this: Min hadin mahatoida. Even before the carbon oimer, you're allowed to eat already. Navas, you have a mitzvah say to wait until there's no lav. The lav of Chodesh is gone. Come the second day of Pesach. Navas says when you bring the oimer, you can go ahead and eat. That's what I say. So therefore, Tavai Philip Maj side Rabbi Yechina, side Shlokish, Ami Tavai. They both say Philip Maj based on Midrash Tayim. Even when the base of Midrash, he brought a carbon oimer. Hey, as soon as it came morning, you're allowed to. Ad etzem hayom doesn't mean noon; it means first thing in the morning. Rashi says, as soon as the morning starts, you're really allowed to eat it. No, boss. There's a mitzvah say to wait until the oimer comes. There's ad havayachem. Taisa goes even further and says it's not even a mitzvah say; it's only a mitzvah say min hamuvcha, which is even less. So in theory, no, boss, we don't want you to eat. So in theory, you're allowed to eat first in the morning. So therefore, no problem. Mashka Yisrael. Even though the Karmer Oimer didn't do his job, it's still mutter because Mashka is not a problem. And as the Moshe said, now how do we know that? We don't even never heard the Shlokish say openly, but we flow lizma. And that is interesting. So it's only the Shlokish, and yet we said before the Shlokish Rabbi Yechon. Rabbi Yechon says that. That now we learn the Mishnah. You should not bring a mincha of the kudim or a mincha of behema. That was the mincha of the sachim that goes ancillary to behema. Before you bring the carbon oimer, why? Because you need a mashke Yisrael. Technically, it has to be something permissible and cold. You didn't bring the oimer yet. You're not allowed. You can't eat from this. How can you bring this carbon? And we're soon going to say, let's talk about not the day of minchas oimer. We're talking about the days before then. Being heavy possible. It's possible. It's going to be possible because it's not much. I mean, a mashke Yisrael. We're talking about, we'll see, not the day of the Omer. And the same thing is, before the Shallechem shouldn't bring, because that's when it's Matzachitim and the Mizbech and all that. And Bekurim as well. Because it's called Bekurim Tzechitim, Be'im Hevi, kosher. As far as Shavuos is concerned, if you did before that, it's kosher. One of the Shlokish said, this is the name of the Shlokish. This is only talking about Erev Pesach. Aval b'shisha also on the day, the second day of Pesach, when you're supposed to bring the minchas oimer, im heavy, you brought it in the morning before you brought it kosher. I'm not sure why McCauley is most like Mefurish. It's pretty Mefurish. That on the day is no problem with Mashke Yisrael. I was just wondering why it says Rabbi Yechon, and we have no proof from here. Rabbi Yechon holds this way as well. What we know is a Shlokish. So that's opinion number 2. Now comes opinion number 3. So we had the Rav who says that because it's enabled, it didn't work out, it's possible. We have Shlokish said the carbon is kosher, but you're not allowed to eat it because you need a minchas oimer to be mastered it. And now we're going to have a Rav that not only is kosher, but you're allowed to eat it as well. The Rav amar minchas oimer should come to Lishma, ksheida v'shireh necholin. The einat tzricha minchas oimer achel. You don't need another minchas oimer to be mastered. And why not? The ein machshava ma'elis. What happened there? You did the oimer with the wrong machshava. You did the loy l'shmai. Machshava does not have effect only on the following criteria. If it meets the following criteria, number 1, it has to be a coin that's suitable to avoid. If it's a coin puzzle and he had the wrong machshava, his machshava cannot in any way impact on the carbon. And the Mishnah, the Gemara will spell out. Something which is ro lavoida, which is exception in Michal in a minute. A place which is ro. The Mishnah Mum had the wrong shmachshavas, doesn't impact. Minchas oimer is not rol avoida. Now, why is it rol avoida? So Rashi says this is the only carbon. It's not a carbon. It's there purely to be mater chodesh. It's not there as a carbon. It's there as an enabler, and that's not a carbon. So then Rashi takes up a whole discussion. What about minchas kanoyis? Over there also, it's not really a carbon. It's only at the end. Rashi brings a cost of the minchas kanoyis. It's called a chatas. So therefore, if you had loy lishma, it's possible because it's called a chatas. The lechazi, the chiddush, the whole thing, and it's a chiddush. It's not a carbon. It's only an enabler. And also the fact that it's barley, so it's different. Over makom haro la'avoida, and when we are placed, only where's la'avoida, la'fuki nivgam mizbech is missing a part. You know, when the volume came, remember we had before them, they came and they broke a part of. So yeah, but so if you b'shas ma'isa, while the mizbech was not fully intact, this kohen had in mind whatever he had in mind. Machshava then is not effective at all. Not effective at all. Okay, so now we learn a new din. Because it says it was a vachta all of us we learn that it has to be intact. Has to be, the carbon has to be, the mizbech has to be fully intact. The Gemara like to talk about when we learn, but I say now this Gemara now this Bryce will take us to the next Mishnah, but we'll go today only halfway. Talk about we learned. It says in the pasuk that it says that you should tell Eden Adam ki Yaakov. We had it many times in the Gemara already. In Zvach and other places, Adam ki Yaakov mekem. It says the Korban Hashem min habakar min hat sign. We learn after the fact of min habema. From every word it says min ha. That means not all the behemoths, not all the bakars. So we took out a revei and nirba. We took out an animal involved in bestiality. We took out an animal that's involved in that's a muktzah set aside for avodah zarah or to worship avodah zarah. Never, if it exactly serve avodah zarah, and so on. So the Gemara, but the Bryce now introduces another min habakar. Then the next pasuk says v'im oila kabbanoi, and says again min habakar. We already learned everything from the first pasuk. Min habehema min hatzai min habakar. We already excluded everything that should be excluded. Why the next pasuk say again min oila kabbanoi min habakar? What does it come to exclude? Well, anytime you don't need it at all. If the animal is treif, how do you know a treif animal can't be a carbon? It's not muktzah, it's not never, it doesn't fall into any of the criteria. So it tells you what min hamuktzah treif is also possible a carbon. Now you can ask a question: what do you need a pasuk for? Simple kavuchaymer, and that is as follows: an animal that has a defect. Shemuteres legend, you're allowed to eat it as long as it's not treif. And yet asura ligavoya, you're not allowed to put it on the mizbeach. So treif shasura legend, if it's also for an ordinary a commoner, ain din shasura ligavoya, surely you shouldn't place it on the mizbeach. Pasnish, right? As we have in that pasuk there. I mean, if it's also for an ordinary person, surely it should be also mizbeach. So that's not a good. So we need a pasuk for. No, because we don't have a kal v'chemer. You know why? Because chaylev v'dam yachichu. What do we put on the mizbeach? The chaylev, the fats, and the blood, and they're both also to a commoner. And yet the Torah has to tell, and yet we're allowed to put a mizbeach. So we see the different dinim between a hedyet and the gavoya and the eibishter. Shasul hedyet with the gavoya. No, that's not it. Gemara says that doesn't slug up the kal v'chemer. Mal chaylev v'dam. You know why there you're allowed to put a mizbeach? Shekain boyin mikal het. It comes from a kosher animal. Okay, this particular part a hedyet cannot eat, but the mizbeach goes on. Oh, but treif is also completely. There's no part of the animal that's mutter. So therefore, how can be? So surely it's also on the mizbeach. I need a pasuk. But like tame mutter legavoya, it should be mutter at all. No, we'll say no. The kal v'chemer is no good. You know what? We have to say the kal v'chemer is no good to explain why we need a pasuk. Because if it's a common sense, you don't need a pasuk to tell you don't bring a treifa. I'll tell you why the kal v'chemer is no good. Malika techech. Malika will prove to you. Shekula iser. Yeah, my malika, the entire bird. Once you do malika, it's unavailable. You cannot eat any bird of it. Basur lehedyet, and therefore a hedyet can't eat it. And yet, we tell the you put on his back. So we see that what? It's two different dinim. No kavachayim from a mum. Nay. Ma'al malika shekain kedushasa aisarta. Till the moment you decide the malika is a kosher bird. It's the malika which is a necessity for the carbon that made it also for the hedyet. So therefore you can put it on the mizbech. It's part of the process. Mashen came by treif. It's also all the time. It's also all the time. So the is a kavachayim. If it's safe for a hedyet, surely you cannot put on the gavoya. Should be shocked just with mezbech in the said lehedyet because also at that moment the hainu likos avokayin lechein lenes lehedyet. Mashen came betray for saying this also start. So the lechayim have a good kavachayim. What do you need a pasuk for? What do you need a pasuk for? Madach balmum, which is mutter to hedyet and also gavoya. Surely treif also hedyet also gavoya. Says the Gemara. So the Bryce continues. If first you have a way of undermining the kal v'chemer, you can tell me the kal v'chemer is no good. So therefore, I have a pasuk. Kisharim and a buckle matter. Say tam alemes. All totally unnecessary is lahaytis a treifa. So now the Gemara is going to work out if you can repudiate the Kal V'chomer, but it doesn't tell you how. So we're going to have six different ways of how to understand what, and each one we repudiate that. Each one's going to come up with an idea why the Kal V'chomer is no good. So let's start here. We'll do part of it today. Ma imish bata. How would you reject this Kal V'chomer? Simen Rakiach Mar Adel Shisha. Amarav. So first comes Lav, and he says, I can tell you, you know why the Kal V'chomer is not good Kal V'chomer. I'll show you that things that are asur lehedget and mutter on the mizbech. Minchas Aimer. Take an ordinary Minchas Aimer. Sha'asur lehedget. Nobody can eat Aimer, right? Because it's Chodesh. You're not allowed to eat Aimer. A normal case of Aimer. That's not my case of Lev Shema. A normal case of Aimer. Nobody can eat from it yet. Or mutter l'gvay. You're putting it on the mizbech, and it's mutter l'kainim. So we see that just because it's asur lehedget doesn't mean it's asur l'gvaya. Says, what are you talking about? Mal minchas aimer came mater as chodesh. That's the purpose of minchas aimer. It's a mater. It's mater chodesh, and therefore you're allowed to put it on the mizbech. That's what it's meant to do. Mashengi treifa doesn't have any positive contribution. Right now we're learning just positive contribution. It does a good thing. Mashengi treifa. So therefore, why should you be able to put treifa on the mizbech? Well, he says no. Not every minchas aimer does positive thing. What about the year shmita? The year Shemitah, there's no chadash. You're not allowed to plant. So if you're not allowed to plant in the year Shemitah, there's nothing new. So the aimer is not doing anything positive, and yet you can bring on the gvay, even though it's also for anybody to eat it because it's chadash. B'shvius, someone says even shvius nami. Even shvius, it's still a positive. You know why? She came matera svichin b'shvius. Things that grow on its own. Yeah, aftergrowth. Things that grow on its own. You're not allowed to eat it until you bring the carbon and that's matter. So it's a positive thing. That's why you can put it on his bech. What about Rabbi Akiva? If you follow Rabbi Akiva holds that aftergrowth is asur shmita. There's nothing positive about him, and yet you can bring him his bech. Even according to Rabbi Akiva, there's no Kal V'chomer. You know why? Because minchas aimer minchas aimer is not minchas is not a good thing, because even according to Kiva, it does something positive, and that's why it's mutar l'gvay. What positive do? It's mater chodesh and chutz la'aretz. As we know, the machlek is kedusha there. If chodesh is mutar and chutz la'aretz, or mahatayid is a mutar or mahatayid is asur, and in fact, is asur, and it's only the Bach who found the heta today, and why the Bach is treated so. As the Alter Rebbe says, because he was matzik klal yisrael, because most people don't follow the laws of chodesh. But even who's not the Reises, so I'm not doing anything positive. She came interesting. The lav is chodesh, right? You know, eat chodesh. But when you put it on the mizbech, what does the oima do? It takes away the lav. If you did eat on shmita, but you shouldn't have. If you ate on shmita, let's say the chodesh, even though you did the Easter, this is how Rashi, even though you did the Easter shmita, but the lav of chodesh you didn't do. So therefore, it achieved something. That's why it's mutar l'gvaya. Taisus has a problem. If you're telling me that there's a lav there, and that what, when you put it on the mizbech, it takes away the lav, even though it doesn't contribute, it takes away the lav of oimer, is l'chayda, then logic will say, let's put a treifa on the mizbech. If the mizbech has the power to remove a lav, maybe the mizbech has the power to remove the Easter treif. V'tata lav to b'teicha. Taisus said the Gemara is so perplexing. The way Rashi learns is, which lav did it take away? It took away the lav of Chodesh, but the lav of Shmita is still there. So then why should it remove the lav of Treifa? What's the Gemara's question? And what's the Gemara's question? Is I don't understand what's going on here. And Nochmadach, if the Easter Shvius is still there, then it's no longer Mashki Yisrael. Remember, it has to be something Hamutali Yisrael. You're telling me that if you put Omer and Shemitah, all it took away was the lav of Chodesh, but the lav of Shvius on this particular Omer is still there. So it's still a problem Mashki Yisrael. And whether it's not Chutz man, it's Shemitah the whole year. So Taisus, he doesn't offer another shot. He just says he finds very perplexing this whole piece of Gemara here. Wait, actually. Ella parachachi. So this is what you should say. Mala minchas ha'omer shekei mitzvasa bekach. Minchas ha'omer is different. You know why you're allowed, even though it's asur lehedget, it's mutar l'gvay, because you have no bread. The Torah said you got to do minchas ha'omer. There's no alternative. You got to use the chodesh, and that's it. So that's what treifa. Who said why bring a treifa animal? Bring a kosher animal. So therefore, the question remains. So we have a Kal V'chomer. Surely treifa you cannot put him as bech. What do you need a pasuk for? Comes along, second answer, Rish Lakish. So I'll try another attempt. Somebody who compounds Ketayah, so also lehedit, you're not allowed to do it as a hedit. For the base of Midrash, allowed to. Now, the way it sounds like right now is the base of Midrash is allowed to do it, and Jacob are not allowed to do it. So we see that what? That you have things also lehedit and mutter legvoya. So the Mefatim Gabru, Mefatim is a person. Who's the Eibishter here? So Gemara rewords the Shlakish. Pitum Aktayach, the compounded potatoes. So us, if you did it lehedit for the sake of a hedit, it's also. Or but if you mutter legvaya, if you did it for the sake of legvaya, it's mutter. We see that what things are also hedit mutter legvaya. But what are we talking about? Mal b'gedosh came mitzvah. Whenever mitzvah kach means you have no breda. Pitum Aktayach, this is how you do it. Masheng a treifa. Why bring a treifa? Bring a kosher animal. So why need a pasuk for tell me treifa is no good? Surely treifa is also hedit should be also legvaya. Third answer. Mar Brei the Ravina, Mar the son of Ravina says, should equal me, like I say, Shabbos to Chiach. I'll show you Shabbos. Shasula had you now be Machal Shabbos, and yet Mutar Legvaya. So we see that what that different dinim, that things which are Asal Hedge can be Mutar Legvaya. But what are you talking about? Mal Shabbos can Hutter Miklol the hedges. Sometimes hedges also allowed to do things on Shabbos. For example, Mila. You're allowed to Mal on Shabbos. There's no Shabbos there. So therefore, head also can do it. Where do you find it? But treif is never mutter. Treif is never mutter by hedges. So how can you think that you're allowed to do it? Says the Gemara, "Otu mila tzedek hedgeru, mila tzedek hedget, mila mitzvahi, mila is a mitzvah." Why doesn't the Gemara bring here for pekuach nefesh, for example? But I guess that's a didn't call it kula. We don't. No, we're trying to say that Shabbos sometimes is mutter for a hedget, so therefore it's mutter for gvoya as well.
Treif would also be no.
Make sense, yeah. We follow that logic, yeah. Again, you have no breda. The mitzvah of Mila is to do these things on Shabbos, so you have no breda. Why bring treif on the Mizbech? Okay, fourth answer. So we still haven't repudiated the Kavochem yet. We have a problem. We have a good Kavochem, that treif is no good in the Gavoya. What do you need a pasuk for? Okay. So I think what about Klein will prove it to you. The head not recline. A kohen wears an avnei. The avnei is made out of klein. The avnei, the gartel is made out of wool and linen. What's that? We find that climb even by hedges sometimes is mutter by tzitzis, wool and linen. So the Gemara says, and therefore you're allowed to do gavoya. So the Gemara says, "Otu tzitzis tzorich hedgedu mitzvah lav lehenesin." What? It's a mitzvah suddenly for our benefit. It's for the Eibishter. Mitzvah, it's a mitzvah. Where do you find that it's mutter for a hedge for his own sake? Ella malak klayim. You can't bring an ivan klayim. Shemitzvosei bekach. Don't bring an ivan klayim. You know why? Because klayim, that's its mitzvah. So Rashi learns we're talking about the avnet of the kohen gadol. The avnet of the kohen. You have him talking about kohen, but avnet have no breda. That's the mitzvah of avnet, wool and linen. Again, so of course it's mutter. We're talking about treifa. When you have breda, don't bring treifa. Treisis learns is talking about tzitzis. And what do you mean mitzvah sebekach? Because if you have a woolen beggar, who said you have to have a linen tzitzis? We have woolen tzitzis. But if you already have a linen beggar, you have no breda, but you have to put on woolen tzitzis. So mitzvah sebekach. Just be more light. Next answer. Rav Shisha ben Avida can say lehed adina v'teisim me'atzad. Okay, we brought all these different points, and each one you said, "Oh, that's unique, that's unique, that's unique." But if you put the common denominator, you'll see that there are things that are mutter l'gvoya, even though it's also lehedit. So therefore, treifa would think the same thing. What is that? Mal malika. I'll start like this. Start malika. Right? So you can tell me Malika Shikadein Kedusha Sarta. You'll tell me Malika is unique because it's the Malika, the process of the carbon that made it also. Till that point it was mutter. So I'll tell you like this: Chaylev and Dam Yechichli. Chaylev and Dam, fats in the blood, is always also. Nothing to do with the carbon. You never eat Chaylev and Dam. And yet it's mutter legvoya and also legend. I tell me, one second, Chaylev Dam came boyim miklal heta. They come from a kosher animal. Mashen can trade the entire animal's treif. Aber Malika Techiach. The entire bird is in the vela, and yet you put it on the mizbeach and not for the person. The Chazal Adin, but they both have different chumras. So is that the chumras is irrelevant? Atzad Shavim, what's the common denominator? Shasurin lehedjit on legvoya. The asa to hedjit and mutar legvoya is af ani ovi treifa. So therefore, I would have thought that treifa also, even though a person the hedjit cannot eat it, af api shasurin lehedjit hey mutar legvoya, but should be permitted on mizbeach. So therefore, we need the pasuk min habakar. That's not a good answer. Mala Hasad Hashavar, you know what they both have in common? She came mitzvah. The Chayil and Dam, the Torah said you got to do Chayil and Dam. You can't choose anything else. The Torah said that you do Malik and Avela. But Treifa, where does the Torah say you should have to use a Treifa? Nowhere. So therefore, use a kosher. So the question goes back. Why do you need a pasuk in a bakar? Okay, this continues on. Tomorrow night.